What's up, Flannelverse? We're back. This is week 7, Thursday Night Football. We have the Broncos at the Saints. We just got inactives. Some kind of fun inactives news. Greg Dulcich is inactive for this game. So if you want to tail me on Lucas Krull, I think this is a game where we can lean on Lucas Krull a little bit. We'll talk about that once we get to tight ends. We also have, surprisingly, Jordan Mims out for the Saints. Did not anticipate that one. Probably should have with Kendry Miller back, but he was kind of involved last week. So Jordan Mims out this week kind of condenses the running back rotation a little bit. I mean, the Saints, it's really just Alvin Kamara is the running back rotation. But, as far as the running backs who might take over, have some contingent value if Kamara goes down, Jordan Mims no longer an option. So we have just Kendry Miller and Jamal Williams there. So some sort of fun inactives news that we just got. But I'm going to go position by position here. Again, going quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. At the end, I will take some questions, play around with some lineups. We'll also, after I'm done doing the player-by-player breakdown, I'll do just a brief look at FanDuel as well. I know some of you prefer playing on FanDuel, so we'll take a look at the salaries and ownership there as well once we're through all the players, just to see if there's any outliers, anything that stands out on FanDuel relative to DraftKings. But we're going to start here. We're just going to jump into quarterbacks to start. What's up, guys? Good to see all of you here, as always. Always fun to see you. If you are not already subscribed, I assume all of you commenting are already subscribed to the channel. But if you're not already subscribed to the channel, trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. Have really appreciated all of your support throughout the season. We're growing quickly, but still 5,000, a lofty goal. So if you would subscribe, I would appreciate it. Like the video, comment, all of that is very helpful for me as I'm trying to grow the channel. All right, let's do it. Let's talk about some quarterbacks here to start. And I imagine I'm going to have to refresh here because I assume we still have Jordan Mims in. I think Rotogrinders already had. Yeah, it looks like Dulcich is already out of the player pool, so that's good. We'll update later, but we'll start with the quarterbacks, and of course, we're dealing with Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler. Of course, two rookie quarterbacks starting here at captain. We have Bo Nix coming in at 19% projected ownership. We have Spencer Rattler coming in at just 9% projected ownership. This is sort of a weird slate where we only really have 5 players who project well, like at all. And actually, I guess we can sort by projection here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Here, I'll go to flex. So kind of a break after we have Alvin Kamara, Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, and then a little bit of a break down to Bub Means. I guess it's just 2.5 fantasy points down from Cortland Sutton down to Bub Means, but it kind of goes from 5 players who are the starting running backs, the starting quarterbacks, and the 1-star receiver we have in this game. And then it's kind of a break to a bunch of receivers who all look pretty similar to me. They're all kind of getting roles now because of injuries to the receivers ahead of them. So we're going to be playing some rookie receivers who were not highly drafted, who were drafted 4th round, 5th round, 7th round, undrafted. So we're going to be dealing with a lot of players getting some opportunities who maybe don't have a lot of pedigree. So it'll be an interesting slate to break down. I point this out just because the ownership is interesting to me on the quarterbacks, given how big of a separation there is after that top 5, and the quarterbacks are obviously both in that top 5. So I have no issue with 19% captain ownership going to Bo Nix. No real issue with 9% going to Spencer Rattler. I think those are both pretty solid, fine numbers to me. I will probably be right around the field on both. So no issue with the captain ownership. Flex ownership, we have Bo Nix at 51%, Spencer Rattler at 43.5%. Similarly, I have no issue. It's a lot of ownership going to both, particularly when we don't necessarily have a ton of confidence in these rookie quarterbacks. But Bo Nix has shown that he can run quite a bit. He's rushed for 30 yards per game, has 3 touchdowns in 6 games. So he's been pretty good on the ground. With all of that said, the way I'm playing it, I am requiring a pass catcher, regardless of where I have Bo Nix in the lineup. I don't think you necessarily need to. I'm doing it tonight. I think you could play him in the flex without any pass catchers because of that rushing upside where he does rush for 30 yards and half a touchdown per game so far this year. That's obviously just an average. But he's been a pretty solid rushing quarterback. He was in college. So I do think Bo Nix is a good enough running quarterback that you could play him at least in the flex without any pass catchers. I'm not personally, I would not recommend playing him in the captain spot without any pass catchers. I know I've seen it in some sims where it showed up as positive EV. I don't buy it. I don't think it's that likely that that Bo Nix makes it in as the optimal captain without any pass catchers. However, with all that said, Javonte Williams to me does qualify as a pass catcher, second on the Broncos in target. So when you're factoring in, how do I want to stack up Bo Nix, you can include Javonte Williams as one of those pass catchers. But yeah, I think you can. I'm going to play a good amount of Bo Nix. I think you could play him without any pass catchers. I think I'm forcing a pass catcher anytime I have Bo Nix. But again, in the flex, at least, I think it's fine to play him without any. Spencer Rattler, his first game rushed for 27 yards. So honestly, not bad for a first game. I don't really think he was much of a runner in college. It's sort of hard to read based on, because sacks are included in the rushing totals. PFF actually has a stat there that you can look at, but it's not a ton of rushing for Spencer Rattler in college. This is kind of what you get. Like maybe he'll get 20, 25 yards per game. So not bad, but still not quite to the level that I would want to play him naked. I think, if I'm playing Spencer Rattler, I'm stacking up with at least one pass catcher. If I have him in the captain spot, preferably two or more. So kind of the standard stuff. Neither of these elite running quarterbacks. Bo Nix, kind of that borderline where I think you can play him. I will have some. My current rules have Bo Nix allowing for just one pass catcher when I have Bo Nix in the captain spot. So that is how I'm playing them. Not taking any major stands on the quarterbacks. Not going to spend a lot of time here because they're not the most interesting talking point on the slate. We've got a lot to break down. I think the ownership generally looks pretty good, and I will be stacking the quarterbacks. I guess we can look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. So far this year, it's not a great matchup for Spencer Rattler. Denver allowing the third fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, and of course, not a great matchup for Bo Nix either. New Orleans allowing the sixth fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. So this is a one game where we have to play from just the options in this game. Both of these have bad matchups. Again, not going to be a big thing for me dinging either of them. Also worth noting, Patrick Surtain is out for Denver, so this matchup gets significantly better for Spencer Rattler. But overall, I'm playing the quarterbacks right around the field, not taking any major stands there. Okay, let's move on. Talk about let's see if this works. All right, let's talk about the running backs. And of course, everything on this slate starts with Alvin Kamara, and I will be playing a ton of Alvin Kamara. I think it would be hard for Alvin Kamara to fail on this slate relative to the other options on this slate without an injury. Like if he plays the full game, Alvin Kamara is he's going to separate from everybody else. As you see here, 6 fantasy point projection better than the next best running back, Javonte Williams, projects for 20 fantasy points, the best projection on the slate. You can see it's the same here. 4 fantasy points better than Bo Nix, the second best overall projection. Really hard to argue with playing Alvin Kamara here. I'm going to have a good amount. I mean, just looking at his stats for the entire year, Alvin Kamara at he has, where am I? Am I in the wrong? No, he has 104. Oh, that's because I haven't separated my team. I was very confused there for a second. No, he's just at the top because he's that good. Yeah, he has 104 carries on the year through 6 games and 36 targets. So 6 targets per game on average, 59.3% route participation. The nice thing about Alvin Kamara is he is completely game script independent. If they're playing from ahead, they're going to be running a lot with Alvin Kamara. If they're playing from behind, they're still going to be passing a lot to Alvin Kamara. And a lot of dink and dunk, probably some short receptions, but this is a game that is pretty likely to be low scoring. So all of those PPR points really add up for a player like Kamara. So I'm going to have a ton of Alvin Kamara. I let's see what the field ownership. I don't think I'm going to be far off from the field. 59% flex ownership for Alvin Kamara and 28.5% ownership in the captain spot. So we're looking at nearly 90% ownership on Alvin Kamara. I think I'm fine with that. I have no issue with either of these numbers. I think I might cap myself at 30%, so I won't be that far off from the field. I'll probably get to about 30% Alvin Kamara if that's where I set my my cap at captain. I might try to stay around 80% Alvin Kamara, just to give myself more outs in case there is an injury, because injuries, this is the NFL, and he's a running back, and he's an older running back, and he has a lot of mileage on him. It's certainly possible that he gets injured. Maybe Kendra Miller comes in, looks good. There are paths to failure for Alvin Kamara, but I'll probably have him in about 80% of my lineups, maybe 30% of those in the captain spot. He looks great. Tough for him to fail unless he gets hurt, but it is possible. Yeah, we did get inactives. Gray asked. So the big ones were Jordan Mims and Greg Dulcich are inactive for this game. Patrick Surtain also, but we kind of knew that coming in. We knew Derek Carr was going to be out. So the two that we weren't totally sure about earlier in the day, Greg Dulcich and Jordan Mims, I think are the only two that really stood out to me. So yeah, Alvin Kamara going to be playing a ton of him. Looks great. Schedule adjusted. Let's see. The matchup for Kamara, slightly positive here, slightly above average matchup with Denver. Kind of a middling, doesn't really mean anything to me. Looks okay. And then outside of Kamara, so we got the news that Jordan Mims is out for this game. So the other options are Kendra Miller, Jamal Williams, and technically Adam Prentice. I'm not going to any Adam Prentice. Kendra Miller and Jamal Williams, sort of interesting. Interesting that they did send not inactivate. I don't know what the word is. Jordan Mims is inactive. Kind of interesting. That means, they're going to be relying more on Kendra Miller and Jamal Williams. I'm going to have some interest there. Now I'm going to reset this. See if we have updated projections, ownership projections, etc. Because I sort of have interest in the New Orleans backup running backs. Also, not like a ton. They're not slam dunk plays, but I'm curious what the ownership looks like. Let's see. Kendra Miller coming in sub 5% ownership at 2.4K. I don't hate that. I'm not like in love with it. I don't feel like I need to play a ton of Kendra Miller, but I think I'll probably be above 5% Kendra Miller. I think it's that interesting. Jamal Williams, 18%. I don't love it with Kendra Miller there. Jamal Williams has just been really inefficient the past couple of years. I don't think he's a particularly good running back. Probably likely that they're still going to use him some. But yeah, I think I am going to fade Jamal Williams largely at 18%. Not like fully fade him, but I'm going to be underweight to the field, certainly on Jamal Williams, with a little bit of trepidation, because I do think it scares me. I think if something does happen to Kamara, suddenly I think Jamal Williams would be more likely than Kendra Miller to take over as the lead running back if something happened to Alvin Kamara. So that scares me just a little bit if there is an early injury, but not really involved in the passing game. So in like a usual game script where Alvin Kamara stays healthy, I don't really think Jamal Williams scares me all that much. We can take a look at his usage a little bit. Actually, for the full year, let's take a look at that. Jamal Williams for the full year, 27 carries in 6 games. So we're talking about under 5 carries per game, just 4 targets on 10% route participation. Just not that great of usage so far this year for Jamal Williams. I don't know if he's given them any reason to want to use him more. Total in these 6 games, 18.1 expected fantasy points. So that gives you an idea of how much of his work is at the goal line, through the passing game, etc. So expected fantasy points, just 3 per game, just has not been really good this year. And I don't really see any reason for them to go to Jamal Williams. So maybe they would go to, maybe Kendra Miller would be the running back they would go to. I sorted out it because these teams seem to love Jamal Williams. Just a great attitude, I guess. The coaches love Jamal Williams. Everybody loves Jamal Williams, but I don't think he's that good of a running back. So I don't think I really want to be playing a ton of Jamal Williams. I'll be fading him. I'll probably be overweight to Kendra Miller. So I guess that's how I'm splitting it up. I'm making the bet on the lower owned Kendra Miller rather than the higher owned Jamal Williams, and hoping for, the upside of the second year player rather than the old vet who we know is not all that good. Yeah, Eric, Kamara definitely considered a pass catcher with Rattler. Yeah, one of the top pass catchers in the game for sure. What's up, Gio? Beginning of the year. I've been doing this all year. Congrats on your 4th milli, by the way. Incredible stuff. All right. And I didn't move this down to talk about running backs. So yeah, I think that breaks it down for the Saints. Really like Kamara. Going to have him in probably 80% of my lineups. If you want to play Kamara in 100% of your lineups, I take no issue with it. Really, the biggest risk there is just injury. He has so many paths to getting there. Doesn't need to put up 20 fantasy points in this game because I think it's going to be a low scoring game where not many people are putting up a ton of fantasy points. So hard for Alvin Kamara to fail outside of an injury or something going really sideways. For me, it would be Kendra Miller over Jamal Williams, just factoring in ownership. It really comes down to just ownership between those two. You can make a case for either in a vacuum. Oh, thanks, Gio. See this guy, generous guy, wins his fourth milli, just spreading the love. Thank you, sir. All right. On the other side, of course, we've got Javonte Williams leading the way for Denver, at least presumably. So far this year, it's been Javonte Williams leading the way. 8,800 projecting, let's see, 14 fantasy points here. Is it the same on Roto Grinders? Projecting for about 38% ownership, around 14 projection. So yeah, the projection about the same. 38% ownership. Honestly, again, he's one of those 5 who actually projects pretty well on this slate. Tough to argue with it. 38% seems fine to me for Javonte Williams. 9% captain ownership. I imagine I'll be a little bit higher than that. I'll probably be fairly condensed to those big 5 just because, again, you have so much value on this slate that you don't really need to pay down at captain. You probably just need to capture the best raw score, and it's likely to come from one of those 5. It could come from somebody like a Bob Means or a Devon Vele or whatever. Some other position could certainly have the highest raw score, but I do think this is a slate where you're probably going to have the highest raw score coming in at captain, rather than somebody that like a pay down option that allows you to pay up for all of the studs. It could happen that it is like, I don't know who would be I guess Audric Estimate is 400. Like if Audric Estimate puts up 4 fantasy points, allows you to get to all of the 5 studs. I haven't tried doing it, so I don't even know if that works. But something like that could happen. Like it just allows you to get to all the 5 studs, but feels less likely on this slate when I expect it to be pretty low scoring. So I think I'm largely going to be leaning into those 5 that project the best in the captain spot, which includes Javonte Williams. Do have some worries about Javonte Williams because he hasn't been very good this year. Really is what it comes down to. He's averaging 3.6 yards per carry, I believe is the number. Let me see. I wrote this down actually in my write-up for Audric Estimate. Yeah, Javonte Williams averaging 3.6 yards per carry. Audric Estimate coming in now. He played a little bit last week, and Sean Payton said he'd like to use Audric Estimate more. They want to give him more of a look. Didn't really have an opportunity last week because they just didn't run that many offensive plays. So we could say Audric Estimate bleed into the Javonte Williams usage a little bit. We've already got Jaleel McLaughlin bleeding into it a little bit. So there are certainly paths. So I talk about Alvin Kamara, like hard to see him failing. There are many ways for Javonte Williams to fail, and we can bring up the usage for the Broncos so far this year and last week. But just overall on the season, Javonte Williams has handled 59 carries, which isn't that great. I mean, 59, 36 for Jaleel McLaughlin, 11 for Tyler Bidet, 4 for Estimate. Kind of feels like they don't really believe in Javonte Williams and want him to be a bell cow when he's only got 59 carries. That's sub 10 carries per year. But he does have 25 targets on the year as well. They still have been using him like he is the lead back, at least the lead back in a committee. Most likely that does continue. But again, I think there's a possibility that they go away from Javonte a little bit tonight, give Estimate a little bit more of a chance, give Jaleel a little bit more of a chance. So I don't love it. It's not a slam dunk to me on the same level as Alvin Kamara, but I still think the ownership that we're getting on Javonte Williams is totally fine. I'll probably be similar to the field on Javonte Williams. So I guess my only major fade so far is Jamal Williams. I think I'll be pretty low on, but I think I'll probably be close to the field on Javonte, not taking a big stand there. But I do really like Audric Estimate. We talked about it this morning. He's just 400. Sean Payton keeps saying, we want to see the rookies. We want to see Audric Estimate. He doesn't project all that well. He's only 400, and he's not getting a ton of ownership. I guess this is in the captain. Let me pull up flex ownership. In the flex, coming in at 6% ownership. Yeah, that's too low for Audric Estime. Again, he doesn't project that well and shouldn't project that well. He has not done anything yet. We have no real inclination that indication that the Broncos want to make Estimate a big thing. It's just Sean Payton saying like, yeah, we'd like to see him more. That's not like the highest level of coach speak where it's like we need to get this guy the ball. It's more like, yeah, we'd like to give him a shot. But he could very well get a shot in this game. I think got a little bit of usage last week. It sounded like they wanted to use him a little bit more if they had had more opportunities to do so. And he's been pretty good. Four carries this year for 27 yards. So he's got 6.8 yards per carry. Again, that's such a small sample size that I'm not like trying to suggest that that's the level of running back he's going to be, but he's been good in limited opportunities so far this year, whereas Javonte Williams has been very bad. It would make sense if they wanted to get away from Javonte Williams a little bit. So with that said, given that Javonte Williams has not been great, I think it makes some sense to make bets on Audric Estime, make bets that they will give him a little bit more usage. Because again, looking at last week's numbers, Javonte Williams, oh no, this is not sorted. Hang on. Javonte Williams, 6 carries last week. So like they really didn't have that many snaps, and it was 6 of 11 carries that went to the running back. 3 went to Lou McLaughlin, 2 went to Estime. So really Javonte Williams just over half of the carries in that game. Now maybe they see twice as many. Maybe they had 22 running back carries in this game. Suddenly it'd be Estime getting 4, Williams getting 12, McLaughlin 6. Obviously we can't guarantee that it's going to go, the split is going to be exactly the same if they do extend it. But given that, I mean, the fact that Audric Estime got in there twice in the first 11 carries last week tells me that maybe they do really want to give him a little bit of a look. And maybe if he does well, maybe they do a hot hand kind of thing and they just let Estime keep going. So I think he does have that potential standalone value. Just if you want to make the argument that that maybe he does have the hot hand and can hold on to that role. But then really what you're looking for, the really nice thing with Estime is he obviously has contingent value also. If something happens to Javonte Williams, I would imagine Estime comes in and starts playing a lot more. Who knows? It could just be Jaleel McLaughlin, but I think he has a good amount of contingent value. And obviously, given that they want to see him in the NFL, like on the field, it's not just an injury. It could also be a blowout scenario. Him being a rookie, I think rookie's more likely to come in and get some playing time in a blowout, whereas a veteran, if you like Jamal Williams on the other side, probably less likely to come in a blowout scenario because they know what they have in Jamal Williams. They don't need to test him in the NFL. So yeah, I do like Estime quite a bit. How overweight you want to get on 6%, Neil? I don't know, probably like 15% or so, which is pretty significantly overweight. But I tend to take bigger stands like that on some of these like lower owned guys that I really like. But yeah, I think going something like 15% Estime makes sense today. And then Jaleel McLaughlin, the other running back of note for Denver, 5,800, doesn't project very well point per dollar at 5,800. Let's see, what's the ownership at? There we go. Just under 19% ownership going to Jaleel McLaughlin in the flex. Also going to get some captain ownership. I did that wrong. Jaleel coming in at 2%. So, just over 20% total ownership on Jaleel McLaughlin. I think that's fair. Sort of involved in the passing game on the season. Jaleel McLaughlin, 21.7% route participation, so not that great, but 12 targets on there, so 2 targets per game so far. You think of him as being a pretty good receiving running back. So I would anticipate that this could go up. Not that promising that he has, less than half of the targets of Javonte Williams, but does also have 36 carries. So that's been a little bit of a surprise to me that he's more involved in the running game than the passing game. But I think he's in play. 36 rushing attempts. So getting 6 rushing attempts. I can do the math here. 6 rushing attempts and 2 targets per game so far this year. Obviously, there's going to be some volatility. Maybe he spikes a little bit higher than that in this game. We just saw like last week as an example of a game where they just didn't have that many opportunities for running backs. Maybe they have more in this game. So easily could go higher than those numbers at 5,800. I think that is fine. Certainly could score a touchdown on the season. 39.1 expected fantasy points through 6 games. So that's about 6.5 per game. Expected fantasy points is not that bad. And then, of course, you just spike a touchdown. I think Julian McLaughlin is out there enough that he is certainly capable of spiking a touchdown. And at 5,800, if he has just like a touchdown on top of 4 other fantasy points, which he's probably going to have regardless of the touchdown, then suddenly you might want him at 5,800. If he scores 10 fantasy points, I think this is the type of game where Julian McLaughlin, that might be enough to pay off his salary. So I think 20% Julian McLaughlin feels about fine to me. It's not a spot that I'm taking a big stand. I think that it is reasonable. All right. I think that's enough on the running backs. Let me just double check. I think we talked about anybody I have interest in playing. I don't think I'm playing any Burton, Prentice. I mean, if you want to, I guess there are those like could score a touchdown and pay off at 200, but pretty unlikely to see a ton of work, neither particularly involved. So I think I'm probably just playing the main running backs here. All right, let's move on and talk about some wide receivers, because the wide receivers are pretty interesting here. All right, so, and I'll just refresh this ahead of time. All right, so at wide receiver, we'll start with the Denver side. So Josh Reynolds on IR, Courtland Sutton, the best projected wide receiver on the slate. Honestly, not that much higher than Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, etc. And he is very, very expensive. 10,800 for Courtland Sutton. On Roto Grinders, projected similarly, just under 12 fantasy points, 36.5% projected ownership in the flex. At captain, 6.5% projected ownership. Again, I think I'm probably just going to lean into these 5 for the most part for my captain ownership. I'll probably be above 6.5% that Courtland Sutton is getting. I really like that number. His usage has been pretty great this year. So overall, not the best situation with the quarterback being Bo Nix, but on the season, he's actually had really solid. Here, I'll pull up season-long numbers here. 46 targets through 6 games is pretty good for Courtland Sutton. Being targeted, 7.5 times per game. I guess it's not like elite numbers, but solid 7.5 targets per game. 80.1% route participation. Good enough usage. 10,800. This is like it wouldn't look great on a main slate when we have a ton of options, but you can only choose from these 2 games. How many times do we say that per show? So on this slate, I think he looks totally fine. I'm not going to be like jamming in Courtland Sutton. I don't think he's like an amazing play here. We can take a look at the cornerback matchups. It's not the best matchup. Courtland Sutton should see some Marshawn Lattimore, but it is not a shadow covered situation. So he'll be, covered. See a lot of different coverage looks. It looks like a slightly negative matchup for Courtland Sutton. Not going to scare me off him. I think the ownership that we're seeing is largely just fine. I think I'll probably be a little bit heavier than 6.5% in the captain, probably then a little bit lighter than the 36.5% in the flex, because I'm going to be leaving some salary on the table. So I'm generally not going to have lineups. I don't even know it's possible, but lineups with all 5. Actually, let me look. Is it possible to play all 5? Let's just, I usually save this for the end, but I'm curious if I could do like an estimate at captain. Wait, it'd be 600. Can you just jam all the stars? I think you can. Yeah. Estimate, Kamara, Sutton, Nix, Rattler. Oh, you can't. You can't fit Javonte Williams. Okay, so you can't quite fit all 5 of the studs with estimate at captain. I don't think there is a $200 player. Let's just throw in Adkins. Yeah, you still can't. All right, so that's good. So you can't possibly do it. I was going to say I'm going to be leaving some salary on the table, so I'm not going to have all 5 of the studs, but I'll probably have plenty of lineups that don't even have 4 of those studs. So ultimately, I probably end up a little bit underweight to Sutton in the flex, a little bit overweight in the captain spot is where I'm going to ultimately end up, I think, with Courtland Sutton. Outside of Courtland Sutton is where it really gets interesting with the running backs, because again, no Josh Reynolds. Devon Vele is the top projected of the other wide receivers. Troy Franklin, and then Marvin Mims, Lil Jordan Humphrey. it's interesting with those two, and I'll just read off what I wrote about them. So starting with Devon Vele is the best projected of the group. Only played 2 games so far this year. He's run like 83% from the slot, so that's kind of interesting. Kind of a big slot receiver because he's 6'4", 203 pounds. Drafted in the 7th round. He's 26 years old, but he has 13 targets on 58.9% route participation in his 2 games. So he has, in the 2 games that he's played, he has really seen pretty solid usage. I have no reason to believe that's not going to continue. I don't. There's probably some volatility in that, but he's been used when he's out there. With no Josh Reynolds, I would expect him to continue to be used. So I do think he looks really, really strong as a play. Let's take a look at the ownership on Devon Vele. Yeah, 24% ownership. Feels totally fine to me on Devon Vele. He's only 4,400. Easy to fit in your lineup. Should see significant usage. So yeah, I think I'll end up overweight to that on Devon Vele. I don't know. It's not going to be a huge stand. 3% projected cap and ownership. I think I'm leaning into the big 5 more so than playing players like Devon Vele, but 3% I could see myself getting there. I mean, he's been, again, 13 targets. He saw an 8-target game already on the season. If he goes for 80 yards and a touchdown, could very well be the optimal captain. So I think that's totally fine. No issue with Devon Vele. The ownership overall coming in, 26%, 27% total ownership on Devon Vele at 4,400. As a wide receiver 2, at least presumptive wide receiver 2, I think he looks pretty good. No issue with that Devon Vele ownership. Then we have Troy Franklin. So Troy Franklin, another really interesting case. Probably more interesting. Okay, 13% ownership. He's only 3,000. Taking a look at last week. So last week we had Devon Vele, and we still had sort by week. Okay, there we go. Devon Vele, 65.9% route participation last week, saw 5 targets. Troy Franklin, 65.9% route participation, saw 3 targets. The interesting thing about Troy Franklin is he actually came in with the best pedigree of the rookies that we're talking about in this game. He was largely considered a 1st or 2nd round draft pick, ends up going in the 4th round. So he fell quite a bit relative to where people expected him to go in the draft. An athletic guy, very fast. I think he's over 6 feet tall, if I remember correctly. I think a pretty good wide receiver who just happened to fall in the draft. Hasn't really seen a ton of usage, but again, Sean Payton said they'd like to see him more. They want to see what they have in Troy Franklin, and I believe this was his highest route participation in a game this year. He had not really seen much at all prior to last week. Suddenly we see that 65.9% with Josh Reynolds out of the lineup. So that's pretty promising to me to see that they finally did play Troy Franklin a little bit more. I think that he could separate, could become a real factor here, and he's coming in at relatively low ownership. So I think I like him. When you factor in ownership, I might like him better than Devon. I like them both. I mean, I think Devon Vele rightfully projects better. We've seen it with Devon Vele. Again, 13 targets in 2 games. Haven't really seen the same kind of usage from Troy Franklin. But when you factor in ownership, I think both are pretty strong plays. I'll definitely be above weight. So I guess I'll say it that way. I would definitely be above weight to 13% Troy Franklin. I think I'll have at least 25% Troy Franklin. This is a spot that I'll get above. Devon Vele at 24% seems fine to me, but not like a number that I'm trying to get above. And if I end up a little bit lighter than that, if I end up with 20% Devon Vele, 18% Devon Vele, I would be totally fine with that. So I guess all things considered, when you factor in the ownership, the price, all of that, I do have a slight preference for Troy Franklin, but I also do think Devon Vele rightfully projects better because, again, we've seen it from him, 13 targets in 2 games played. Outside of, so those are the 3 big ones. Marvin Mims continues to be Sean Payton's running joke. He loves to say, oh, we'd love to get him involved. He's so good. We should get the ball to Marvin Mims, more opportunities, and then he just doesn't. I don't know what is going on there with Sean Payton. Somebody said earlier that they don't trust him. I don't trust him either. I don't trust Sean Payton at all. I also have the Vikings fan bias against Sean Payton. Maybe it's just a non-Saints fan bias against Sean Payton, non-Broncos fan, I guess, too. But just don't really trust what he says in general. But I'll read the quote here from Sean Payton. Man, what was the latest? I thought he had one from Marvin Mims recently. Maybe not, but he's oh oh, never mind. Here's offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. This was a week ago. Every time you watch Marvin Mims return a punt or kick, highlights that he's the guy we'd like to get the ball to. I think there were some others too with Marvin Mims recently, but I think that was the most recent quote on Marvin Mims, who came from the offensive coordinator. He's a guy they'd like to get the ball to. That was actually, I think that might have been prior to the last game where, to their credit, they did actually use him a little bit more last week. Marvin Mims, 36.6% route participation, 3 targets. He's always somebody that can just have splash plays. 35 ADOT last week, so that's just kind of the his profile as a player that extremely boom bust. So on a single game slate, if he sees 3 targets with an ADOT of 35 yards down the field, I'll probably have some interest. But then it all comes down to, with a boom bust player like that, what does the ownership look like? Marvin Mims 8%. Yeah, I think if he sees the same usage he saw last week, I would probably make that bet that he can just catch one of those, hopefully house it. He's only 1,200, getting 8% ownership. I do think Marvin Mims, pretty interesting play. I think I'll be overweight to that as well. The only other one, Lil Jordan Humphrey. So yeah, we got the revenge game with Sean Payton returning to New Orleans and bringing Lil Jordan Humphrey with him. I don't think the usage has really looked great for Lil Jordan Humphrey in recent weeks. Last week, just 17% route participation, 1 target. The week prior, week 5, he actually had 59% route participation, saw 2 targets. That's right. I was looking for an injury earlier and couldn't find anything. It seemed like he just kind of lost favor with Sean Payton. Seems like maybe they want to give Troy Franklin more run, since they are just not a very good. They're a young team that is not having a ton of success. Maybe giving some more run to the rookies, but it's always possible that there's more going on there that we just didn't see last week. So maybe we could see it flip the direction, see Lil Jordan Humphrey get more usage than what he saw last week. It's not my expectation. My expectation is that they continue to play a bit more Troy Franklin. So yeah, I'm going to be leaning in on Troy Franklin. I'll have maybe. Oh yeah, it's a good call from Not You. Says Humphrey took over for Vele when Vele hurt his ribs. Yeah, good call out there. And we had Vele returning last week. That's right. That's right. So yeah, I'm not really anticipating that we're going to see a ton of low Jordan Humphrey here. And yeah, I think we can look at the slot rate. Devon Vele, 78%. Yeah, low Jordan Humphrey been running majority of his routes from the slot. So yeah, that adds up. So I don't think I'm going to be going to low Jordan Humphrey in any kind of volume. I might take a couple shots here or there, but projecting for 4% ownership. I prefer some other players that are not getting ownership over low Jordan Humphrey, players that I think will have a real role. So not a priority. Maybe I get a few shares here or there of low Jordan Humphrey, but yeah, definitely not a priority for me. So I think that does it for the Denver receivers. Let's take a look at the New Orleans receivers. And yeah, thank you for the reminder. Sean, if any of you have not hit the like button, please do like the video. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, commenting under the video after we're done. All of that very helpful as I'm trying to grow the channel. Appreciate that shout out, Sean. Okay. New Orleans receivers. So it all starts, of course, all starts with Bub Means. I say that like we all know. Yeah, Bub Means the clear alpha here. Now we have no Chris Olave, no Rashid Shaheed on this slate. So it's kind of up in the air who is going to take over as that lead receiver for the Saints. Kind of anticipating. So far, as you can see in the projection, Bub Means has lead there. Mason Tipton has been the one who's been running over 50% of routes for a while now. Cedric Wilson, kind of the one, veteran in the team who we kind of think should have some role. And then you have Equanimous St. Brown, who has, I believe, not played yet this season. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think he's played yet this season, but not on the inactives list. So could come in. I guess he's the 4th receiver on the Saints. Maybe he sees a little bit of run. But Bub Means, I guess we can take a look. Take a look at what happened last week. So we still had Rashid Shaheed active last week, playing the whole game. We did lose Chris Olave after just two total snaps last week. So Olave was out early. We can kind of get some sense of what they want to do, at least without Olave out there. And it was Mason Tipton, 43.8% of routes. Kind of interesting that he actually lost routes last week when he had been playing over 50% in recent weeks. 47.4 the week prior to that, 52.6. He's been kind of around 50% all season. I think that continues. I don't think that they, are wanting to rely on Mason Tipton. We can look at the full season stats here as well. So Tipton on the season, 41.2% raw participation, just 11 targets through 6 games. Not somebody they seem to be overly reliant on. But Bum Means kind of interesting last week, 70.8% raw participation, saw 8 targets in week 6. So kind of we're all, this is all based on small sample sizes, but we are jumping to the conclusion that Bub Means is the preferred wide receiver here for the Saints with Spencer Rattler. Projects the best of the Saints, and I think that makes sense. Just seeing we don't have much to go on here, but seeing that was the usage last week, it makes sense to project him the best, obviously, because what else are you going to do? Just make stuff up. 27.5% projected ownership for Bub Means. I think that's fine. Not a number that I'm trying to double or anything, but I'll probably eat it. Probably be around the field on Bub Means. Not going to let him make or break my day. At captain, Bub Means coming in at 5% projected ownership. That also seems fine to me. Not a spot that I'm going to be. My guess is that I come in slightly underweight there, but I honestly have no issue with it. Again, could break out. Could be the clear wide receiver one by the end of the day. So I don't hate it. I think the ownership on Bub Means seems totally fine. Mason Tipton coming in at 20% ownership. He's only 1.6K, so much cheaper than Bub Means, but this is a slate where we have enough value. I'm not overly concerned about it. I think 20% ownership, seems again okay to me. Not taking any major stand there. I don't think I'm playing Tipton at captain, most likely. More likely to play him in the flex. So I think Bub Means is the better play objectively, coming in not that much higher ownership, just because Tipton has been out there and hasn't really done that much. Actually lost his role a little bit last week. I think it'll come back this week again because we have Olave out, as well as Rashid Shaheed. So I think we do see more of Mason Tipton, but pretty promising the usage for Bub Means last week. So I do think it makes sense that he would be the preferred wide receiver in New Orleans. And then of course we have Cedric Wilson, who again last week 52.1% raw participation, 3 targets in that game. He's been in the NFL for feels like a really long time at this point. Has never really done that much while he's been in the NFL. On the season, 24% raw participation, just 4 targets on the season. Yeah, not a player that I think is going to step up and be like the star on the team. Maybe though, he's the vet, so he is the veteran leadership. Maybe they want to rely on him. Maybe Spencer Rattler wants to lean on his vet a little bit. I don't know. Coming in at 9% ownership, that feels pretty good to me. I think I'll probably come in over 9% on Cedric Wilson. If you haven't noticed, I'm largely just taking bigger stands on the guys who I think are going to have real roles and are going to be under 10% owned. That's often what I like to do in Showdown. It's just if a player I think is going to have a real role on the team, have opportunities to score fantasy points, and they're going to be unowned, I'm going to be overweight on those players. If I think a player is unlikely, like Jamal Williams, I don't think he's going to have many opportunities, yet he's still getting 18% ownership. I'll fade that. I'll fade the 3,600 Jamal Williams for players that are, cheaper and I think we should have more opportunities. Although Jamal does have probably better contingent upside than any of these receivers. I'm going to lean into the players that I think should have some opportunities here. And I think Cedric Wilson actually looks pretty good at 9% ownership. I was ready to say I don't really love it, but the ownership is low enough that probably going to run over 50% of routes suddenly becomes pretty interesting. And then Equinemius St. Brown, man, that's tough because, again, I don't believe he has played so far this year. Really hard to know how much of an opportunity they are going to give him. There he is. What's up, Brick? I don't know. I don't know how much they're going to use Equinemius St. Brown. They haven't used him so far this year, but he is. They're probably going to give him some opportunities. Maybe he's just that wide receiver 4. I think given that he's not going to get any ownership and he's not inactive, I was kind of hoping he would be inactive so I didn't have to worry about it. But projecting for sub 3 fantasy points. Here's your guy, Brick. You're asking for who's the guy who might get 1 catch. I think Equinemius St. Brown seems to fit that bill fit that bill as the number 4 receiver on the Saints. Um, do we have any other? I'm curious if Rotogrinders has anybody else projected among wide receivers. It's really tough when you get these players, like it's a whole new situation, and now you get this other vet who's coming in who has not even played so far this year. All right, let's see. Means Wilson, Equinemius St. Brown, Mason Tipton. Yeah, nobody else even projected for anything. So they're probably gonna play their fourth receiver at some point. So I would say he qualifies as that guy who maybe sees a little bit of ownership. Um, yeah, some interest there. I was prepared to not have interest in Equinemius St. Brown, but given that they only have 4 receivers with a projection, suddenly he's like, yeah, I think that's playable. He'll probably see the field at some point. Um, he- has Equinemius St. Brown ever failed you on a showdown slate? He has definitely failed me on many showdown slates. So I will let him fail me again because he's coming in at such low ownership. I think that's enough on the wide receiver. Did we oh, the schedule adjusted stuff. So again, not a great matchup on paper for the New Orleans receivers. Second worst matchup on paper, schedule adjusted. But again, no Patrick Surtain tonight. That does change things quite a bit because you go from one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL to a backup, and the backups typically are not going to be that great. So yeah, major change there. And then it's a slightly below average matchup for the Denver receivers. All right, let's move on and talk about tight ends here. Let me change my sidebar. And the tight ends, yeah, definitely interesting. No, you could. I've not played around with 10K, leaving 10K on the table. Maybe when I build lineups, I'll try to see what lineups look like when I am leaving 10K on the table because I would imagine you can make fine lineups on this slate with 10K left on the table. Um, yeah, I don't think that it's the craziest thing on this one. Sterling, I have not made any bets on DraftKings. I don't know what is available there. I'm a big Kroll guy, so we'll talk about the tight ends here. And I'll refresh. I mean, it all starts with Juwan Johnson. We can start with the Saints side of the game. Juwan Johnson projecting for 19% ownership, only projected for 7 fantasy points. I do really like Juwan Johnson. He's 6,800, kind of an uncomfortable price tag when we have so much value on the slate, but uh, kind of getting lost. 19% projected ownership, and he's the only other Saint receiver outside of those big two that can really have any kind of confidence in. Had some really nice games last year. Last week we saw his best usage of the season, 72.9% route participation. The week prior to that was at 68.4 in week 5. So he came into the season hurt, 57.9 the week prior to that. So we've seen every week he's seen more and more usage. Now the 2 top receivers on the team go down. We know Juwan Johnson is a pretty good receiving tight end. He had some big games last year. Should be a focal point, at least one of the focal points of the Saints offense. So yeah, I like Juwan Johnson as a pay up option. He's probably going to need a touchdown to pay off his $6,800 salary. I don't think he's going to get there just on like yardage. Maybe he has 6 catches for 60 yards, so I guess it's possible even without a touchdown. But yeah, at 6,800, you are paying more than all of these cheaper options, but I do think he is as likely as anybody to be the leading target earner, maybe outside of Kamara. But like who's competing with Bub Means, Mason Tipton, Cedric Wilson? I think Juwan Johnson is just as likely as any of them to be the leading target earner. Now again, he is 1,600, so the salary does reflect that, but the ownership really doesn't at 19%. And really, this is a slate where we have so many inexpensive options that you can kind of do whatever you want to. So I'll just take the guy who I think has the best raw like ability to hit a high score. And that would be Juwan Johnson. So yeah, 19% ownership going to Juwan Johnson. I imagine it will end up higher than that. Foster Moreau there's another one of those guys who might just have one catch for a touchdown. Adam and I talked about this morning. I think that he's the better end of that like backup tight end tier in that he is actually on the field a fair amount. 25% route participation last week, saw 2 targets on the season. Foster Moreau, 26.8% route participation, 9 targets. So 1.5 targets per game for Foster Moreau. I believe he has seen some, let's see, has he seen end zone targets? I feel like I've Yeah, 2 end zone targets on the season for Foster Moreau, only 1 for Jawan Johnson, but I think that's just kind of a fluky small sample size thing. I think Jawan Johnson pretty likely to be a target earner in the end zone in general. But yeah, Foster Moreau certainly in that as well. Um, so I think he's on the better end of the backup tight end spectrum. I think that he has more usage than the typical, like, he might be in there for 5 plays and see 1 target and hopefully catches a touchdown. I think he's might see a few targets, and he will be on the field more than just in the red zone. So don't hate Foster Moreau. 7% ownership. Yeah, actually 7. That seems totally fine for Foster Moreau. No issue with that. Might come in over that again just because he's getting sub 10%. I'll probably lean in a little bit there. Now I'm trying to think who am I going to lean out on other than Jamal Williams? Might be the quarterbacks. I might actually end up a little bit lighter on the quarterbacks. Maybe Javante a little bit lighter now that I'm looking at it in the flex, higher in the captain spot because you gotta get away from some of the ownership somewhere. I think those are probably the spots where I end up at least lightly fading. Maybe I get down to 35, 40% on the quarterbacks, something like that in the flex. But Knicks, I think, maybe Rattler is one that I'd be a little bit more inclined to fade lightly. Yeah, but anyway, back to the tight end. Just I don't want to say that I'm going to be overweight on too many players without mentioning some that I think I'm going to end up fading to get too overweight on those. Um, Back to the tight ends. So yeah, Juwan Johnson, I like it. I'm going to be probably overweight to what the field is doing there. Foster Moreau, I think probably going to be close to the field, maybe slightly there, but not taking any, not trying to take any major stand on either of them really. Like slightly overweight to Juwan Johnson, I think. Probably right with the field on Foster Moreau. I don't think I'm playing any of Holker. Um, all right, and then sorry, I'm getting a lot of beeps, and I'm wondering if it's okay. Making sure I still have my audio. Just had to double check. All right. On the other side, Lucas Kroll, I have a ton of interest in Lucas Kroll. We do have Greg Dulcich inactive again. We had the quote from Sean Payton that they want to see what they have in Lucas Kroll. They like what they've seen in practice. He's a guy that was expected to be a strong receiving tight end. So 68.3% route participation. Just seeing the usage that he had last week. So again, the past 2 weeks, Greg Dulcich has been inactive. They've made him inactive. And interestingly, in week 5, Lucas Kroll only ran 25% of routes. So that honestly scares me just a little bit that he had such low usage the first game without Greg Dulcich, but not enough that I'm not going to be well overweight on Lucas Kroll. 68% route participation last week, saw 3 targets. I think it's very likely that he sees at least that many, hopefully more than that. I could see him very involved in this game with no Josh Reynolds. Um, and he's only 1,000. Again, had strong pedigree coming into his NFL career, and now finally kind of getting an opportunity here. So at 1,000, getting and let's take a look at the ownership on Lucas Kroll because that's really what it comes down to. If everybody was playing Lucas Kroll, you'd be like, all right, then I don't need to be jamming it. But he's coming in at projected for 6% ownership. I'm curious if it's similar other places. Because if he was coming at 30%, then I'd try poke holes on that. I'd say like, why would anybody want to play? Why is everybody jamming this guy relative to the others? But he's the one who's kind of getting lost in a sea of value at only 1,000 for a guy who had some pedigree, finally getting an opportunity. I think it's really interesting. I'm going to be leaning into Lucas Kroll here. I think this could be a breakout game just based again on what we saw last week. So he was right up there. He was number 2 on the team in route participation behind Cortland Sutton, ahead of Troy Franklin, ahead of Devon Valley. I mean, just barely. Again, only 3 targets, but I'm not all that concerned about it. I think we could see more usage here for Lucas Kroll. So yeah, sign me up. I will be overweight to Lucas Kroll. Nate Adkins, what was it last week? 6 routes run, saw 1 target. I think he fits into that classic backup tight end where I'm not really trying to jam in Nate Adkins. I think he is a fine, in a 150 set, make it into your player pool, but not somebody that I'm going out of my way to get to. Oh, I should also point out with the Foster Moreau point. Adam brought up a good point this morning that we could also see Foster Moreau get more usage here with with Olave and Shaheed out. Like they could just do more two tight end sets using some Foster Moreau instead of going to all these wide receivers that they haven't really wanted to use in the past. Adam Troutman revenge. Interesting. Does Troutman have what is his projection here? I haven't given a ton of thought to Troutman. He's 600. All right. What's the ownership at on Troutman? Okay, projection for 7.5% ownership. So not going completely unowned. Project for 1.5 fantasy points at Roto Grinders. I think to me strikes me as the classic backup tight end. This is just last week. Ran 4 routes, didn't see a target last week. What's his season numbers look like? Troutman. 20, okay, better than I thought. 20.4% route participation on the season. Has 3 targets through 6 games. So I mean that's not great. 3 targets through 6 games. Could certainly see Sean Payton just getting him in his own look, giving him one opportunity there. Yeah, it's possible. It's not my favorite play. I don't think I'm going to be going out of my way to play a ton of Adam Troutman. If anything, I feel like that ownership, when you look at the ownership there, 7.5% feels a little bit high. Like Adam Troutman getting more ownership than Lucas Krull. I don't know. I prefer Krull, but yeah, I mean that actually could be a thorn for Lucas Krull. Could be maybe they want to use Adam Troutman in the return to New Orleans. I don't know. There's that kind of narrative reason maybe, but I think I'm just leaning in on Krull. I'm probably going to be close to the field. I'll have a little bit of Troutman. I'm not going to be not a place that I'm like making a huge stand there. I'm hoping that they try to see what they have in Lucas Krull instead. But speaking of guys who win millies, I mean Gio's won 4 of them. All right, I think that does it for tight ends. Yeah. So let's finally, defenses, kickers, obviously pretty important on a game with a really low total. And 2 rookie quarterbacks who could make some mistakes here. They're going to be owned. I think they probably should be owned. I don't really know that there's that much I need to say about them other than, yeah, I'm probably going to shoot for having about 25% of each of these defenses. Saints only projecting for 15.5% ownership at 5,200. Broncos projecting for 19% ownership at 4,800. I think are both pretty strong plays. I think I prefer the Broncos, even though this game is in New Orleans. I think I prefer the Broncos defense somewhat here. Then kickers, we have Blake Grupe 16%. We have Will Lutz at 22% at 5,400. I probably shoot for 25% or so of the defenses in my lineups. 20% of the kickers in my lineups. I don't know. It's not a place that I really feel is very predictable. So it's sort of tough to talk about them other than to say, yeah, on a game that we're expecting, a slate where we're expecting low scoring, I think it makes sense to lean in on the defenses of kickers a bit. One thing that I always like to do to try to get a bit different, I think it makes a lot of sense on this slate, is playing a quarterback opposite the opposing defense. I think that could certainly work on this slate if you want to go with the Broncos defense and Spencer Rattler, or even better, I think the Saints defense with Bo Nix is going to look really good to me on this slate. Because again, as usual, say Bo Nix throws an interception, throws a pick 6. I mean, that would be the ideal scenario if you have Bo Nix with the Saints defense. Say Bo Nix throws a pick 6, suddenly the Saints defense has 8 fantasy points from the interception and the touchdown. Bo Nix loses 1 fantasy point, but he gets the ball right back and he's in a better game script because now the other team has scored, so it's staying competitive, or maybe they're playing from behind. So all in all, I like playing the quarterback with the opposing defense. I particularly like. I think Bo Nix and the Saints is going to look good here. All right. Gio says, oh, you have the Browns for 30%. You're probably right. Ownership and Saints at 20%. So maybe I don't know if I want to flip it. Wait, so you have the Broncos for more. What does Roto Grinders have it for? Broncos at 19%, Saints at 16%. Yeah, I'm debating who I like. I mean, the Saints are cheaper. They're on the road. I also think they're the better defense. Although they're missing Patrick Surtain, so there's sort of I can't decide who I like better of the defenses. Honestly, not generally a spot where I'm trying to match the field. Like I just don't have a good enough read on kickers and defenses in general. I will say kickers, it is in a dome, so a better spot for kickers than was it on Monday night when we had the crazy wins and they just kept missing kicks over and over. Not gonna have that in this game at least. It's in a dome, so so maybe we should be leaning more into the kickers. If the field is going to lean more into the defenses, this could be a slate where we should just um, yeah, I do agree with that, Gio. Probably we do see a little bit of inflated ownership due to the low total because everybody is like, this is such a gross slate. Let's just play it through the kickers, sorry, the defenses and the running backs, and just like hope that it's ugly. So I do think that that makes sense to me that they probably do get a little bit inflated ownership. But yeah, I'm honestly not trying to make a major stand. Probably trying to about match the field, get different elsewhere. Okay. Excuse me. All right. Oh, let's take a quick look at FanDuel. I'll get to the questions and lineups segment of the show, and I know the one of the questions I always get, so I'm just anticipating the question is how do things look on FanDuel? So we'll just do a brief look at FanDuel, and then I'll play around with some lineups on DraftKings. So on FanDuel, I've got to find the right slate here. MVP, Kamara 33% seems fine on FanDuel. So FanDuel, there is no salary multiplier. So it's literally just the highest scoring player in your lineup needs to be in the MVP spot. Kamara definitely as likely as anybody to be the highest scoring player on the slate. I have no issue with that. No real issue with 20% Bo Nix. 4% Cortland Sutton looks pretty good. I think I do. I like the idea of playing some Cortland Sutton at MVP on FanDuel. I didn't hear it. It actually the defenses and kickers generally look better at MVP on FanDuel. They're a little bit more likely because it is half PPR, a little bit more likely to just be the highest scoring player on the slate. I think it's plausible and they're not getting a ton of ownership. So I don't hate the idea of playing like Broncos defense in the MVP spot on FanDuel. And then just, kind of eating the chalk elsewhere. You can just go to Kamara. I mean, not many people have Broncos defense and then Kamara and then go to Bo Nix and I don't know, Cortland Sutton, and then some cheap options, something like that. So I don't hate the idea of doing something like that on FanDuel. But you're obviously if it's cash game setting, you're playing Alvin Kamara in cash in the captain spot. Just projects the best on the slate, looks the best in the captain spot. But if you wanted to get different, I would say honestly, one of the defenses or kickers, or Cortland Sutton at 4% is contrarian enough that I have interest there. I mean, Javonte Williams at 7%, that's not bad either. So there are ways to get different that I think could make sense. I don't know that I'm going to get too different from that. I mean, if you wanted to go like Marvin Mims, I guess is a guy. This could be a really low scoring game where Marvin Mims again has 3 targets, 35 yards down the field. Say he scores touchdowns on 2 of them. Suddenly, Marvin Mims at no ownership. You're the only person who has him. Could look okay at the MVP spot. Only a consideration for the largest field contests on FanDuel. Otherwise, yeah, you're just kind of sticking with Kamara, Nix, Rattler, maybe Javonte or Cortland Sutton. Probably don't need to get too different unless you're playing the largest field stuff. If you want to play the largest field stuff, get away from some of the dupes that suddenly you can think about guys like Mims, Troy Franklin. I think also kind of low ownership. Generally gets more usage, so I might actually prefer it even with Troy Franklin over Marvin Mims. Nobody really standing out as like a slam dunk, except for maybe Sutton at 4% looks pretty interesting. I think at flex we're going to get more better options on fan. So let's see who we have here. Again, I'm fine with these ownerships at the top. 39% for Spencer Rattler feels a bit much to me. See, Vele's coming in at just 17% at 7,000 on FanDuel. Franklin 10% is okay. Again, the Lucas Scroll coming in at 4% at 5,000. Min priced on FanDuel coming in at 4%. If he just scores one touchdown, he can keep up with all the other receiving options on the game. So I think that's pretty interesting. Lucas Scroll at 5,000. Again, in the flex. I like it better in the flex than the cap and then the MVP spot on FanDuel. But I do think he looks good. Mims at 6%. I think that looks fine to me. Jawan Johnson, 14%. Yeah, I think we've got, plenty of cheaper options that I think look pretty interesting to me. And here it's like the ownership between Kroll and Equinemius St. Brown is close enough that I would rather lean on the guy that I think is going to be on the field running routes 68% of the time again this week. I think he's probably still got that role this week. Not necessarily, certainly not guaranteed because it was again 25% the week before, but I think it's more likely for Lucas Kroll than Equinemius St. Brown. So I'd rather probably take my shots there. But estimate 5,500 seems okay at 6% projected ownership. I don't hate that. Okay. Should we build some? Let me check comments, see if anybody had any questions or anything, and then we'll Jawan captain on FanDuel. I think you could do it. He has 2 touchdowns within his range of outcomes. It's not like my favorite thing. Thoughts on fading Williams on Fan? Do you mean Javonte Williams? Yeah, if you're, and I know you're not like 150 maxing, so if you're only playing a handful of lineups, I think it's fine. I think you could certainly fade Javonte Williams if you want to on FanDuel. Bo Nix or Sutton captain day. Yeah. All right, crutches. Bo Nix or Sutton. I think both look strong to me. Favorite Saints wide receiver. Probably Bub Means. I think all things considered, he's getting still low enough ownership. He's the highest owned of the Saints receivers. Um, once you factor in like ownership, I think then Cedric Wilson becomes interesting only as an ownership play. But I still think like overall Bub Means, just given he is still getting pretty low ownership and should be, I think, the leading wide receiver, probably my favorite. Okay, let's play around with some DraftKings lineups here. All right, so again, I think I'm often going to be just leaning into Kamara at captain. He's going to be my most owned captain. So I'm just going to try that to start. And I'll just go right down to I really like Lucas Kroll, so I might as well throw him in there. Gets my salary down to 78.25 left per player. Troy Franklin, I think, is a player that I anticipate I'll be overweight on relative to the field, getting pretty low ownership. So now I have 2 contrarian pieces in here with Kamara, allows me to do quite a bit with the rest of my lineup. So who else do I like? I'm going to like Bo Nix. Got 2 pass catchers in there, so might as well throw Bo Nix with his pass catchers. Now I could throw Rattler in here. And this is, I mean, you can see, so I can't fit both of Sutton and Rattler at this point because I already have 2 of the studs in Bo Nix and Alvin Kamara. Can't play both. I guess I could play like Spencer Rattler and Javonte Williams if I wanted to. So this is where I think it is viable to leave a ton of salary on the table. So I could do something like, all right, let's throw Rattler in there and then one of those. So what Bub Means is 4,000. Like, hey, this is a strong lineup. I've got both quarterbacks. I've got the star running back in Alvin Kamara. And then I've got Kroll, Franklin, and Bub Means. And I think it's very viable for, so I'm going to need, for example, Bub Means, I'm going to need him to outscore everybody up to 9,700. So I for this lineup to work, I need him to outscore Javonte Williams, Jawan Johnson, Jaleel McLaughlin, the kickers and defenses, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's certainly plausible for Bub Means to outscore all of them. So again, you look at this lineup, it's leaving 5,700 on the table, but I think it's pretty viable on this slate to leave a significant amount of salary on the table because I don't think Javonte Williams is a sure thing to put up a lot of fantasy points. I don't think there are that many players on this slate who are a sure thing. And you don't need, the only players you need to outscore Cortland Sutton here are Spencer Rattler, Bo Nix, obviously Alvin Kamara. Nobody else is expensive enough that you could pay up for, could replace them with Cortland Sutton. So you really don't need this to be the highest scoring lineup possible. Or you don't need this to be like all these players to be the highest scoring players. I think this is the type of lineup for only for a large field GPP that I think looks pretty strong, leaving a significant amount of salary on the table. All right, Kubert wants me to do a lineup with a kicker, so let's do a kicker lineup. All right, so we will. Do I just go back to Kamara? I don't know. No, let's do a Bo Nix at captain lineup. All right, so we'll go Bo Nix. And again, so let's go Bo Nix, and then let's throw in Cortland Sutton, his top receiver. Now we can throw in. Groupie, throw Kamara in the flex. Hard to get away from him. So now I have just one pass catcher. Again, I think you can play Bo Nix with just one pass catcher, but might as well throw my guy Crawl in there. Could have gone to Franklin or something instead. Now we have 7,300 left. Now here we could be using almost a full salary cap. Do I want to do this? I'm only leaving 500 on the table. Might be too chalky here. We've got the double stack. What else could we do instead of Jawan John? I mean, that's where, again, you can go down to Bob Means to leave a little bit more salary on the table. Well, we don't have Spencer Rattler, so don't need to go to a pass catcher. We can now go to a defense. Maybe here's where we go. Broncos defense. So we just got Kamara and Groupie from New Orleans. Maybe they don't score a ton of touchdowns. They're just kind of PPRing to Alvin Kamara, and then Groupie's getting field goals. Suddenly the Broncos defense looks good. Now we're leaving 2,500 on the table. I think this looks like a pretty strong large field GPP lineup that includes Groupie, includes the Broncos defense. Yeah, I think that looks strong to me. How much Kamara is too much in 150 lineups? There is no too much. I think if you're okay with with the risk of playing him in all 150, I would have no issue with it with Kamara. I think I'm going to probably set my limit at like 80% total, and it'll be like 30% in the captain, 50% in the flex. But I would have no issue with playing 100% Kamara. I think, barring an injury, which is obviously always a possibility, I think Kamara is pretty likely to put up double-digit fantasy points, and I don't know that it needs much more than that on the slate. I could be wrong. This could be higher scoring game than we're expecting, but I think that there are ways. It's tougher for Alvin Kamara to fail on this slate than a lot of other slates. I don't know the prop bets. I did do a pick six, and like a fish, I took all overs in pick six. But I like Crawl had a pretty low, like 22 was his passing yard total. I kind of like that. I thought that was strong. I like Alvin Kamara's receptions was like 4.5. I kind of like that over. I'm probably a fish though, just taking the over today. I didn't even look at anything before I did it. I think Spencer Rattler rushing under looked pretty good. It was like 24 or something like that. I think that's a strong under bet on Spencer Rattler, but I honestly don't do a ton of prop betting. I can't do it in Minnesota. I can only play like pick six, pick 'em stuff. So I don't know what the options are. Yeah, A.T. Perry. A.T. Perry is not on a roster right now, as far as I know. So not concerned about that. FanDuel in large field GPPs, I would leave at least 2,500 on the table to really avoid dupes. In smaller stuff, you obviously don't need to, but if you're playing like the largest field GPP, I usually try to leave like 2,500 is a pretty good rule of thumb if you're trying to avoid a ton of dupes on FanDuel. All right. I need to go get to making some lineups here. So appreciate all of you. If you've not already done so, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, etc., etc. Oh, I didn't realize that Perry is on Denver's practice squad. Well, at least he's not playing here. I really appreciate you also. Yeah, if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave comments after all of that is very helpful. Thank you guys, and I will catch you later.